Mom. Long time no see. How are you? After a long time, a call from Grace, my daughter living far away. What do you mean, how are you? You hardly ever get in touch. I wish you'd call more often. I'm sorry. That's why I'm calling now, right? And, sorry it's so sudden, but can I stay with you for about a week starting tomorrow? Grace got married 5 years ago and hasn't shown her face even once since the marriage greetings. Sometimes I send a message asking if she won't come home for a visit, but she says she can't find the time or can't get time off work, and she has stopped coming by. Now, my only daughter is coming home for the first time in 5 years. I was thrilled and immediately reported it to my husband, Joseph, when he came home. Then he said, "Grace is something wrong? Something wrong? Do we need a reason for her to come visit after so long?" "No, we don't, but it's just so sudden," he muttered, tilting his head. The next day, Grace returned home, and we had our first family reunion in 5 years, the 3 of us. Just when I thought Grace was taking a bath, she seemed to be looking for something. "Mom, can I have a week's worth of old newspapers? They make the closet warm." "What?" "Sure, but old newspapers for a closet?" I didn't quite understand what she meant, but thinking she might have started keeping a pet or something, I handed her the newspapers and gave Grace the closet she would use tonight. "Thanks for going out of your way. It's been a while since I've slept in a closet." "What? What do you mean?" "My name is Madison. I live with my husband, Joseph, who just recently turned 60. Joseph is very serious about his work. I take pride in supporting him as a housewife. He's not very talkative but always finishes the meals I cook and always says, "Thank you for the meal." It might seem ordinary to others, but I find comfort in this daily life. He has said that once he retires, he wants to take me traveling to various places as a thank you for the daily meals. And he wants to take our daughter along too. We have an only daughter, Grace. She got married 5 years ago and now lives far away, having not shown her face since the marriage greetings. Occasionally, I've sent messages asking if she will come home for a visit, but she says she can't find the time or can't get time off work, and she has become distant. Having lived under the same roof for so long, it feels like something is missing without her. I used to think we communicated well enough, and we were a close family, going shopping or watching movies together. Last year, I wanted to celebrate her turning 30, but she was too busy, and schedules didn't align, and another year has passed without doing so. Well, as long as she's doing well, that's what matters most. I didn't think that after living together for so long, we wouldn't end up not seeing each other for such a long time, so I often found myself sighing with loneliness. When will she finally have a break from being busy? But there's no use in just talking about it, so maybe I'll wax the floor today? I mutter to myself while dedicating myself to housework. Just a little longer until my husband retires. Once he has more free time, I plan to visit Grace. As I was changing my mood and polishing the floor, a call came in. Perhaps my thoughts reached her. It was a call from Grace. I was very surprised because Grace, who hardly ever shows her face or gets in touch, suddenly called. Mom. Long time no see. How are you? What do you mean, how are you? You hardly ever get in touch. I wish you'd call more often. I'm sorry. That's why I'm calling now, right? And, sorry it's so sudden, but can I stay with you for about a week starting tomorrow? I was surprised and, of course, agreed happily. When my husband came home, I immediately told him about today's call. Welcome home. Grace called today and said she's coming here tomorrow. Grace is? Is something wrong? Something wrong? Do we need a reason for her to come visit after so long? No, we don't, but it's just so sudden. She said she found some time, so let's ask her about it when she comes. How many years has it been since she came home? Let's put some effort into cooking. I just waxed the floor today. I'll clean the house from top to bottom now. Good to be enthusiastic, but please don't overdo it and collapse. While saying that to me, my husband seemed happy as he watered the plants at the entrance, talking to them. And the next day. It's been a while, both of you. I'll be in your care for a bit. Nice to see you, Grace. Make yourself at home. Grace, whom we hadn't seen in a long time, seemed busy, maybe too busy, as she looked a bit worn out. I was a bit surprised to see Grace, who used to gather various cosmetics and care about her makeup, appear without any, but more than that, her hair seemed much more damaged than it was 5 years ago. And her simple attire, unlike her usual interest in fashion and various clothes, made me wonder if this was her way of becoming an adult. But I had to force myself to find words of acceptance. It seemed a bit too forced. Anyway, she made the effort to visit her parents' home despite being busy, so I wanted to let her relax as much as possible. For dinner, I prepared Grace's favorite dishes. Mom, you never fail. Everything's delicious. Grace said it was delicious as she ate, but she left almost everything after just a bite or two. I went to prepare a bed for Grace while she was taking a bath, grabbing the freshly laundered bedding I had taken in the day before. Then, Grace, who had finished her bath without me noticing, Mom, called out. Grace used to take long baths for beauty reasons, so I was preparing leisurely, which made me a bit puzzled. When I went towards where I heard her voice, Grace was in front of the closet. Wondering what she needed from the closet, it seemed like she was looking for something. Mom. Can I have a week's worth of old newspapers? They make the closet warm. Sure. Old newspapers for a closet? I didn't quite understand what she meant, thinking maybe she had started keeping a pet or something, but I gave them to her since she asked. Regaining my composure, I carried the bedding to Grace's room. Thanks for going out of your way. It's been a while since I've slept in a closet, she said as she received them. I was surprised, but felt it was somehow inappropriate to ask if she had started keeping a pet. So, I just stood there, mouth shut. Grace seemed puzzled by my silence and tilted her head. Mom, what's wrong? Nothing. I could only reply before leaving the room. My husband, who had been watching the exchange from the shadows, said, Hey, Madison. Don't you think there's something odd about Grace's behavior? Yes. I shared my concerns about Grace's bare face, her overly simple attire, and how she barely ate, or rather, seemed unable to eat much at dinner. It turned out my husband had the same worries, and he sat down, covering his face with both hands. After a while, he looked at me with determination, nodded firmly and said, Let's gently ask Grace about it tomorrow. For now, let's just go to sleep. A bad feeling stirred in my chest, but I decided to trust my husband's words and went back to my room, trying not to think about anything and just sleep. When you want to clear your mind, take a deep breath. Before I knew it, I had fallen into a deep sleep. In the morning, Grace helped me prepare breakfast. This really feels like our family's breakfast. Brings back memories. Grace, you can sit down and wait for it to be ready too. Our trivial conversation brought a smile to my husband's face. The discomfort from the day before seemed like an unfounded worry, and I was tempted to believe everything was fine, reminded of our life before in this peaceful atmosphere. Comforted by the familiar scene, my husband went on to water the houseplants and do his morning exercises as part of his routine. Then, Grace suddenly shouted loud enough to drown out the music from my husband's radio exercises. "I'm sorry." Startled by the sudden outburst, my husband rushed to the kitchen. I stopped making soup and turned around to see Grace apologizing over and over, dousing her fried eggs in sauce and shaking slightly. Confused by the situation and seeing Grace trembling, I froze. But my husband approached her slowly and patted her gently. "It's okay." Then, taking the sauce from Grace's hand and applying it to the rest of the fried eggs, he said in a calm tone. Then, in a gentle tone, "Our family prefers sauce on our fried eggs, don't we? Is it different for Robert?" Grace seemed to remember something. "Robert gets really mad if there's no soy sauce," and said in a low voice. At that moment, I finally understood the unease I felt yesterday and why Grace had come home. I was ashamed of how happy I was about my daughter's return, as I could imagine her position in her household. It's likely that Grace's husband, Robert, does not treat her as an equal. Grace's attire was not simple but could be considered plain. She might not wear makeup because she's not allowed to buy cosmetics. Her damaged hair and worn-out appearance could be due to stress. I had thought Robert, Grace's husband and a colleague who is 4 years her senior, was a sociable young man with a refreshing smile when I met him, but I found myself clenching my fists in anger that I could not suppress. Then, my husband, Madison, gave me a look and said, "Let's have breakfast." He must have realized I was trembling with anger. He implied that making a scene now would only hurt Grace. My husband is truly wise. I quietly began setting the table with enough forks and glasses of water so we could start eating. Grace seemed a bit calmer, silently took her seat, and drank a little water. Deciding not to bring up the conversation for now, we finished breakfast as if nothing had happened and then sat back at the table to relax, at which point I tried to broach the subject with Grace without being too direct. "Grace, don't worry about staying just a week. Feel free to stay here without any reservations." Grace glanced at her dad for a moment, then averted her gaze and whispered, "But Robert won't allow it." When I asked if she was worried about Robert, she hesitated before saying, "Not exactly, but," and looked down. Realizing that pursuing this topic might corner Grace made me feel uneasy. Yet, to protect her, it was clear we needed to hear her story to separate her from Robert. My husband, with a determined look, told Grace, "I'll do anything for your happiness, so lean on us without worry." Grace remained downcast for a while but then lifted her head and began, "Actually," she prefaced before slowly starting to share the details of her married life. The conditions she described lightly surpassed our imagination in their deplorability, hard to believe they could be inflicted by someone she had vowed to spend her life with. For starters, even before their marriage, unreasonable demands and verbal abuse were often hurled at her in the workplace, and once home, she was subjected to cruel words that denied her very personhood and simple verbal abuse. Furthermore, she was deprived of her closet and all means of communication with the outside world, including her mobile phone, were controlled by Robert, making it impossible for her to seek help. Despite both working, she was forcibly burdened with all the household chores. Robert next allowed her not to work, so she was forced to quit her job, and if she did something displeasing, he would immediately find fault and berate her. If Grace fell ill, she would be scolded instead for not being able to manage her health. Even her beloved fashion, makeup, and cosmetics were deemed a waste of money, and she was not allowed to purchase them satisfactorily. When I was shaking with anger to the point that veins were bulging on my forehead, Grace said, "But Robert is also struggling because he has no outlet for his stress," in a way that seemed to defend him. That's irrelevant. My husband raised his voice in anger. Let's take it easy. I responded by grabbing his arm in an attempt to calm him. My hand was trembling slightly. Seeing my husband shake with anger, just like me, at the attention focused on our daughter, helped me regain some calm. I couldn't understand why Grace would make such a statement in defense of him, despite being subjected to such unreasonable treatment, and I looked at my husband's expression. Perhaps sensing my intent or able to imagine Grace's feelings, my husband showed a sad expression and said, "Grace has always been a kind child, but..." He paused before adding, "I, as your parent, cannot forgive Robert, and I think you should leave him." It was rare for my usually reticent husband to make such a definitive statement, so his feelings were painfully clear to me. At the same time, I somewhat understood the reason for Grace's defense of Robert from my husband's pained expression. It must have been a form of self-defense, a way to protect herself. Believing that he was not at fault was the only way she could protect herself, perhaps because she was too traumatized to make a sound judgment. The reality that our daughter had been so badly hurt was thrust upon us, leaving us overwhelmed with frustration and helplessness, tears unstoppable. And the anger towards Robert, who could hurt his wife so much and carry on as if nothing happened, made us tense with rage. We are not heartless parents who could stay silent after seeing our daughter hurt like this. She is our daughter, whom we have cherished and loved dearly. A serious, personable, and kind daughter, liked by everyone. We all believe such a person should never have to suffer harm from anyone. We will protect Grace and ensure she divorces Robert to reclaim the life she deserves. Because there are limits to what a layman can do, we need to find a trustworthy lawyer. Even after a week had passed, we kept Grace at our home. Abusive messages asking why she was not at home were sent to her multiple times by Robert, so we had Grace turn off her mobile phone. Likely, he was managing the GPS too. His messages made it seem like he knew she was at our house, her family home, but thankfully, there was no sign of him showing up in person. Then, we hired a wise lawyer with good online reviews to ensure Grace's divorce proceedings went smoothly and started gathering evidence. At first, Robert flatly refused to divorce, but he quieted down after testimonies were obtained from coworkers about the verbal abuse and unreasonable demands Grace faced while still employed. Moreover, testimonies from neighbors about hearing Robert shouting at Grace and finding recorded calls between Grace and him forced him to consent to the divorce. It seems he was the type to make enemies even among those around him. It's clear that no matter how much one tries to improve their outward behavior, it cannot fully cover their actions. But even with the divorce confirmed, we cannot be at ease. Considering Robert's nature, it's unlikely he will remain quiet. Taking the lawyer's advice to use the law's full force, we decided to ask Grace if she would be willing to file a lawsuit. My true desire is to use the full force of the law to ensure that our daughter never has to face him again, but I wonder what Grace's feelings on the matter were. We must not forget that our actions were taken not for revenge against Robert, but solely to protect Grace. Overstepping what she desires would be wrong and not what we want. After some thought, Grace shared, "I don't want to go back to that life, and I never want to see Robert again." Therefore, we decided to do everything we could, which included seeking a restraining order through the courts. Surprisingly, the restraining order was easily granted, and Robert was ordered to pay a significant amount of compensation. The crime of trampling on human dignity was recognized as grave, and it felt like a slight weight was lifted from our hearts. Grace, a bit more spirited now, understood how far from normal her situation had been and had secretly confided the real circumstances, which she couldn't share with her parents, to the lawyer who had been helping her. Though usually bound by confidentiality, this time the lawyer informed us, suggesting we take care of it as a family or, if necessary, introduce her to a specialist, that before marrying, Grace had a good relationship with Robert as colleagues. They were seen as a perfect couple by those around them, carrying a good image. However, as time passed, only Grace's honesty, work ethic, and achievements were recognized. And she began to outpace Robert in the company. Robert, though sociable, had a high pride and often blamed others when things didn't go well, which meant he didn't receive favorable evaluations. The gap between Grace and him gradually widened, and it was accepted with a sense of inevitability by those around them. There was talk among peers about whether Grace would leave Robert or if Robert should be supported by Grace, which eventually reached Robert's ears. From that point, Robert began to take out his jealousy and irritation on Grace, effectively controlling her social interactions and making it impossible for her to leave. After she tried to break it off once, his escalation prevented any separation, leading Grace to think she might just have to endure it. Robert's jealousy of Grace, who was well regarded by her peers, did not cease, and he began to verbally abuse her within the company, often witnessed by colleagues. However, this was never brought to light, and Grace, under Robert's control, had no one she could turn to for advice. Upon marrying, she was forced to quit her job. Grace intended to support the household finances through dual incomes, and initially, Robert agreed. However, once married, he changed his attitude. As a housewife, Grace found herself restricted in every aspect. Firstly, financially. Due to unreasonable demands to reduce spending, she was deprived of her closet, and all communication devices, including her mobile phone, were controlled by Robert to cut costs. There were also restrictions on going out, and she could no longer take care of her appearance, resulting in damaged hair and skin. Women tend to improve their mood by doing their hair, dressing fashionably, applying makeup, and engaging in such recreational activities, but it seems all of these were taken away by Robert. Seeing Grace living a restricted life made Robert mistakenly believe he had the upper hand, leading to an escalation in his unreasonable verbal abuse and demands. It's a disturbing story. Hearing this from the lawyer, I've often wanted to scold my past self for not seeing through such a cowardly man. It became clear that Grace, having had her means of communication, including her mobile phone, taken away and her outings restricted, struggled to contact us. Certainly, if she couldn't use her mobile phone except in front of Robert, she couldn't ask for help. We regret not actively reaching out to Grace instead of waiting for her to contact us, such as visiting her or stopping by when we were out and about. To avoid Robert's verbal abuse and unreasonable demands, Grace was forced to appease him, likely leading her to suppress her own feelings and act against her will. The only silver lining was when Robert left Grace's mobile phone at home during a long business trip, allowing Grace a chance to contact us. Whether it was accidental or intentional, without it, Grace might not have reached out to us. We're grateful Grace found the courage to ask for our help, and that we noticed the changes in our daughter. I was glad we could be of assistance. Initially, when we heard everything from Grace, we were filled with regret for not noticing her situation sooner, but now, we're genuinely relieved to see Grace smiling and living with us. We didn't lose our daughter, after all. Currently, Grace spends her days with us. She occasionally helps my husband with his gardening hobby, sweating together. Though my husband planned to get into it more seriously after retirement, with Grace's help, we might consider expanding it sooner. I've been entertaining the idea of eventually selling our produce at markets or supermarkets, though it's just my wishful thinking, but it would be a joy if that day comes. In any case, I'm glad we could bring back Grace's smile. We haven't returned to joking around or nagging each other like before, but I'm looking forward to gradually seeing the old Grace return.
Where are you? Come back home now. The house is a mess. Excuse me? Who's this? I don't recognize your voice, and I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm Sylvia. I've been a housewife for 3 years since marrying Zach. I like cooking, and I even have a chef's license. I occasionally hold cooking classes using this license, and the classes have become quite popular. Zach is friendly to those around him, but his attitude at home is cold. Zach and I met through a mutual friend and got married after dating for 2 years. Both our families and friends congratulated us, and we were able to have a very memorable wedding. However, since getting married, Zach has become more distant with me, and he would make horrible remarks, leaving me distressed.
What do you want for dinner tonight?
Anything's fine. After breakfast, Zach gave a curt reply and headed to the entrance with his bag.
I see. Oh, are you going to work now? Have a good day.
Even when I saw him off at the entrance, he would leave without turning back. Did I do something wrong? I would always think about this while cleaning up after breakfast, but time would pass by without an answer. I would finish most of the housework in the morning and start preparing for the cooking class in the afternoon. Holding a cooking class using my qualifications is one of my hobbies, and all the students are lovely people. Today's menu is homemade cheesecake, and I'm planning to make several variations like pistachio and chocolate.
Ah, I forgot to buy it. I still have time to go shopping if I leave now.
I quickly got ready and headed out for some last-minute shopping. At the grocery store, I ran into one of my students.
Ah, Sylvia, hello. Are you here for today's shopping?
This woman, Tess, is a young woman who recently joined my cooking class. But perhaps because of her friendly nature, she's adored by the other students like a younger sister.
Hello. Yes, I forgot to buy something and rushed here.
Is that so? Let me help you. Would it be all right if I come over to your place with you after this?
Thank you. Yes, let's go back home together.
Awesome! Tess and I finished our shopping and went back home. Afterward, she helped me with the preparations, and we waited for the other students to arrive. In the meantime, we chatted about trivial things and I even gave her advice on her love life.
My boyfriend is older than me, and we've been dating for over a year, but he's never taken me to his place. I was feeling insecure, but there was no point in doubting him, so I decided to wait for him to invite me. I realized worrying is a waste of time. I understand. I've had my own worries about Zach, but thinking about it doesn't lead to any conclusions, and I'd rather not dwell on it.
Right? It feels more beneficial to do something enjoyable in the meantime.
Indeed. Thank you. I've been a bit troubled lately, but talking to you has cheered me up.
Sighing, I said this, and Tess looked worried for a moment but then smiled and cheered me up. Meanwhile, the students arrived one by one, and once everyone was there, we started the cooking class.
I'm home.
That evening, while I was preparing dinner, I noticed Zach had come back and went to the entrance to greet him.
Welcome home.
Dinner's ready. Okay. He muttered and went to the bathroom loosening his tie.
Not this again.
I sighed, but remembering my conversation with Tess, I cheered myself up, telling myself that everything was okay.
If you're going to shower, I'll bring you a change of clothes. Please put your laundry in the basket.
I know that without you telling me. Leave me alone. All right, sorry. Are we stuck in a rut? His response that he gave me without even looking me in the eye still made me feel lonely. During the meal, we were silent, and he was always looking at the TV or his phone. How's work been going? Is everything good? Yes. I made cheesecake in today's cooking class. Want some after dinner? No. By the way, I was thinking of looking at some furniture this weekend. Want to come with me? I have work. Lately, our mealtime conversations have been like this, lacking any spark. Seeing as we were sitting at the same table, I wish we could have even trivial conversations. The lack of conversation makes it harder to understand Zach's thoughts, adding to my anxiety. About the next cooking class. As I began to say, Zach slammed his fork down. Hey, you're so noisy that I can't hear the TV. Are you trying to annoy me on purpose? His clearly irritable remark made me a bit nervous. Who do you think allows you to run a cooking class when you're only good for housework? I'm tired from work and just want some peace at home, so can't you keep quiet? I was shocked by the words he said as he was glaring at me, but I chose to stay silent to avoid provoking him any further. It was even more hurtful to me that he was glaring at me the first moment our eyes met today. Good. Don't talk to me. After that, we had our meal in silence. I couldn't enjoy the dishes that I had taken time to prepare, and time seemed to drag on. A month later, Zach had stopped speaking altogether. He even stopped saying good morning. And he ignored me when I spoke to him. At this point, I desperately wanted to know the reason, but was too scared to ask.
Good morning. Breakfast is ready.
I kept talking to Zach even though I knew I'd be ignored. Maybe he was stressed from something at work. Perhaps he was just lashing out at me because of that stress. I desperately wanted to think positively, hoping maybe this was his way of showing his dependency on me. Otherwise, I felt like my heart would break. I had cooking class today, but I burnt some food. So I had to remake it. Oh, by the way, our neighbor had her baby safely. I was thinking of getting her a gift soon. Any ideas what would be good? Should we get some new dress shirts soon? One of them got ruined the other day. Zach's silence had now lasted over 2 months. I was forgetting what his voice sounded like. My heart had already broken. I was starting to wonder if we could even continue as a married couple. But making decisions was difficult without knowing the cause of Zach's current state, leaving me with nothing but loneliness and anxiety about our future. Then, I fell ill and had to go to the hospital. I thought it was just a cold, but the test results came back and they were bad. I was told I needed further examination. They say illness starts with the mind, but could this be it? You'll need to stay here a few days for more tests, so please get your things ready and come back again.
All right.
I received the test results and pondered how to tell Zach. I hoped the detailed examination would turn out fine, but if they find something. My stress only grew on top of an already anxious daily life.
Welcome back. There's something I need to tell you.
I greeted Zach when he came home from work as usual and tried to start a conversation with him, but he still ignored me. But I continued anyway.
I've been feeling unwell and went to the hospital. It turns out I need to go through more detailed tests. I'll have to be hospitalized for a few days. So, you'll need to manage meals and laundry on your own.
Zach's expression did not change even when I talked about my health, and it was clear that he had not stopped what he was doing or showed any signs of being upset.
So, you're ignoring this too? Well, anyway, good luck with that.
I realized that he truly didn't care about me. I had hoped that talking about my health might make him a bit worried, but I was naive. But there was no time to feel sad. Surprisingly, there was a lot to do. Unlike Zach, my students were all worried about me, and their words were so comforting that I couldn't help but shed some tears. Afterward, I went in for my scheduled hospital tests, which unfortunately came back with bad results. I was told surgery was necessary and was given a consent form. Please have your husband sign this. The doctor's words felt like a stab in the heart. I was sure he wouldn't even listen, let alone sign this paper. When I asked what to do if Zach couldn't sign it, the doctor said,
"Oh, is your husband away on a business trip? Then your parents can sign it instead."
Hearing that, I decided to ask my parents to sign it if Zach refused. When I returned home after a few days, no housework had been done, the laundry and dishes were piled up. Even the trash from ready-made meals hadn't been taken out. I had suspected as much. Then, as usual, Zach returned home silently and sat down at the table set with dinner. I was nervous.
"Welcome back. I was discharged from the hospital today. It must have been tough while I was away, right?" "I'm sorry. So, I need to have surgery, and your signature is required on the consent form. Could you sign it, please? After we finish eating and I clear the table, I'll leave it here for you."
As expected, he kept ignoring me. Feeling frustrated that there was not the slightest sign of concern when he heard about his own wife needing surgery, I decided to take the plunge and ask him why he was behaving like this.
"Why are you ignoring me? Did I do something wrong? It's been about 3 months, hasn't it? Please, just tell me why."
Perhaps my emotional outburst was too much, because Zach stood up from his meal halfway through and left the room.
"Why?"
I collapsed, crying alone. I didn't know what to do anymore. Can we even say that we are a married couple in a situation like this? I couldn't bear such painful circumstances any longer. Maybe I needed to change myself. I tried to reboot my mind, fill it with positive thoughts, and went to sleep. Since the consent form for the surgery needed to be signed, I headed to my parents' house the next day. Zach hadn't signed the consent form I had left on the table. I wasn't expecting much anyway, so I got ready and left the house without any more sadness. Upon reaching my parents' place, they welcomed me with smiles on their faces. Seeing their smiles made me burst into tears, and they hurried to comfort me, patting my back.
"What happened?"
They asked out of concern, so I decided to tell them about my situation. After hearing my story, my parents were outraged. My father said with a stern expression,
"Get a divorce and come back home right now."
But without knowing the reason, I was unsure how to proceed. My parents then suggested,
"Why not hire a detective agency?"
Even if I had no reason to suspect an affair, knowing how he spends his time outside might provide a clue as to why Zach was ignoring me. I accepted my parents' suggestion and decided to have a private detective investigate Zach's activities. The agency agreed to conduct the investigation during my surgery and hospitalization, and they would inform me of the results once my condition stabilized. They were very cooperative and ready to start immediately. Consulting with my parents and the detective agency made me feel a bit relieved from the anxiety I was bearing. My parents, who signed the consent form, also accompanied me to the hospital on the day of my surgery and waited outside the operating room the entire time. Thanks to them, I was able to undergo the surgery with peace of mind. The surgery was successful, and I had no problems with my recovery. When my condition stabilized, I contacted the detective agency, and they told me they were ready to report the results. I decided to hear the report in the hospital with my parents present.
"We found that your husband is having an affair."
Hearing those words made my heart race. I started to tremble slightly. My mother said,
"You don't have to force yourself to hear this."
But I insisted I wanted to know the details.
"You have your condition to worry about, so if you would like us to stop at any point, please let us know. For now, we'll continue. The woman is a staff member at the cafe on the first floor of your husband's company building. They met there and seemed to have lunch together almost every day. They would often meet after work and then head to a hotel. We were able to obtain evidence quickly. Their relationship has been rumored within your husband's workplace for over a year now.
Over a year? We've only been married for 3 years. So he started having an affair less than 2 years into our marriage?
It seems so. When did you first notice a change in your husband's attitude?
Upon being asked by the detective, I realized that indeed, Zach became colder a year after our marriage. I never thought it could be an affair, but now, looking back, the timing makes sense.
Everything was normal until a year into our marriage, but then he started acting cold towards me.
So he had been seeing someone since then.
I feel so foolish for not realizing it.
I tried to laugh it off, not wanting to worry my parents further, but I couldn't hold back my tears. My parents who were beside me looked very sad.
We understand how you feel. With this much evidence, you can file for divorce and claim alimony. It's not my place to say, but you don't need to put up with this anymore. Ultimately, it's up to you.
Hearing the detective's words, I looked at the photos again. I saw Zach smiling in them. It was a smile I hadn't seen at home for so long, one I used to adore. But it was directed at another woman, not me, yet, upon closer inspection, I recognized the face.
Wait. Tess?
I hadn't noticed her when I first saw the photo because I was focused on Zach, but the woman with him was indeed Tess.
You've got to be kidding. Wait, you know this woman?
Yes. She's a student in my cooking class.
I had no idea Tess was Zach's mistress. So, you knew her. It breaks my heart to deliver such cruel news. But, it seems this woman didn't know your husband was married. She didn't know she was the mistress.
Hearing this, I remembered Tess's confidences to me.
Come to think of it, Tess had confided in me that her boyfriend never took her to his place. Well, that makes sense. He couldn't take her home because he's married. We did some digging on her, and she has a good reputation. We didn't realize she was acquainted with you, as your cooking class was closed during our investigation. What are you going to do?
I found it hard to believe Tess would engage in an affair and felt the need to talk to her. If she was aware of this and was having this relationship regardless, I wanted to hold her accountable. Whether Tess knew or not, I had already decided what to do about Zach.
I'm going to divorce Zach. I want to do it right now. And I want to talk to Tess. I'll decide how to deal with her after our conversation.
My parents agreed with my decision, urging me to come back home right away. The detective also offered a supportive smile, saying they would help however they could. I felt I had allies. This solidified my resolve. After being discharged, I waited until Zach was at work to pack my things. The house was in a terrible mess after my long absence. But that no longer mattered to me. I packed the essentials, left the filled-out divorce papers on the table, and left the house. I got into my parents' car, which was waiting outside, and went back to their home. 2 weeks later, Zach called. Seeing his name on my phone, my heart raced, and my hands shook, but my decision to divorce was unwavering, so I answered.
Hello?
Where are you? Come back home now. The house is a mess.
Zach's voice, which I hadn't heard in a while, was rough.
Excuse me? Who's this? I don't recognize your voice, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Zach seemed even more infuriated by my response.
Don't mess with me. Leaving divorce papers like that.
I'm busy right now, so please don't bother me.
Are you making a fool of me? Come back and clean up this place.
I don't know who this is, so I'll be hanging up now. I immediately ended the call. I used to want to talk with him and hear his voice, but now even the sound of his voice was repulsive. After hanging up on Zach, I exhaled deeply, relieved. At that moment, my mom knocked on the door and, with a smile, suggested we have some tea. While having tea with my parents, the landline rang, and it was Zach again.
Oh, Zach, it's been a while. What's the matter?
That's what mothers are for. She was calm as ever. My father was beside her looking furious.
Vanessa, it's been a while. Is Sylvia there by any chance?
Yes, she's here.
I thought so. Actually, Sylvia left divorce papers and left. I'd like to talk with her, but it's not working out. Could you ask her to come back home?
Yes, I know about the divorce papers. Could you sign them and submit them?
What? What are you talking about? I don't want a divorce. And Sylvia is the one at fault here. She left without getting any housework done. Don't you think she's a failure as a housewife?
Not at all. But if you think so, that's a good enough reason to sign the divorce papers, isn't it?
Well, if she would just come back and take care of the house, I'd give her another chance.
You're rotten to the core.
Excuse me? Vanessa?
From what you're saying, it sounds like you just need someone to do the household chores, right? Then why don't you hire a housekeeper? What were you thinking, not signing the consent form for surgery, not being there for the procedure, and not visiting her at all during her stay? A husband who doesn't support his wife during hard times is not even a husband, he's a disgusting human being.
It's because I was busy with work.
No, it's because you found it bothersome, right? And now, because there's no one to do the chores, your house has turned into a garbage dump, and that's why you're looking for Sylvia? Sylvia isn't a maid. Enough is enough.
Hey, you! How dare you call us?
Anton.
Letting my daughter marry you was the biggest mistake of my life. What do you think my daughter is? Just submit the divorce papers already. And never come near my daughter again. Got it?
My father seemed unable to contain his anger any longer, and my mother had to forcibly take the phone away from him as he yelled. Then he slammed down the receiver with such force that it looked like it might break.
Anton! You're going to break the phone!
Oh, sorry. I got carried away. Watching my parents' interaction, I couldn't help but laugh. After that, Zach called many times. Just seeing his name on the phone display made me sick. Hello?
It's me. When are you coming back?
He must have forgotten the conversation with my parents. Zach was contacting me like nothing had happened.
Excuse me, who is this? Stop playing around. I'm trying to reach out to you here. Didn't you want to talk to me?
The Zach whom I know seems to have lost his ability to speak, so I don't recognize your voice. Besides, I have no interest in talking to such a person anyway.
Playing hard to get, huh? I'll talk if you come back now. Hurry up and take care of this place.
These words made me understand it again. That Zach was indeed looking down on me. I was seen as a mere housekeeper, not his wife. No need to talk, then you.
Enough already. How much more trouble do you want to cause? Keep up this lazy attitude, and I'll really divorce you. You depend on me too much to get by without me.
I'm glad to hear you're willing to agree to the divorce. I realized I couldn't harbor any affection for Zach anymore. I just wanted the divorce to be finalized as soon as possible.
What? Have you finally lost your mind? You can't live without me.
I wondered why I ever married such a person. I couldn't even remember what I used to like about him.
You were better when you were silent. If all you can do is say such things, maybe it's best if your mouth gets sewn shut. Goodbye.
I wished he would just be indifferent and sign the divorce papers already. It seemed like this troublesome situation would continue a bit longer. And today, I was supposed to talk to Tess. This matter was also important. I got ready and headed to the meeting place with Tess.
Sylvia!
Seeing me, Tess waved with a smile. It didn't seem like she knew about the situation.
Sorry to keep you waiting. It's been a while. Yes, it's been a while. I'm so happy to see you. How have you been? Are you okay?
Tess, whom I hadn't seen since the last cooking class, was concerned about my health.
Thank you. Things have settled down now. Though I still need to go for regular checkups. That's good to hear. But don't let your guard down, okay? So, you mentioned you wanted to talk today. What's up?
We entered a cafe and ordered drinks. And then I got to the main topic. So, Tess, you talked to me about your boyfriend before, right? His name isn't Zach, is it? When I asked, Tess looked surprised.
Yes. You know Zach? That's a surprise.
Tess's eyes widened. Know him? He's my husband. When I said that, Tess froze. An uncomfortable silence followed, and I could see Tess's hand trembling slightly as she held her drink.
What? Husband? Zach is? What? Sylvia's.
Tess seemed confused. From her reaction, it was clear she had no idea. So you really didn't know? I only recently found out that Zach was having an affair too. Tess's face turned increasingly pale hearing the word affair.
Affair. I was having an affair. But it might just be someone with the same name, not the same person.
I placed a photo in front of Tess. Tess hesitantly took it, and upon seeing the photo, she started crying. I was deceived. This is the worst. Sylvia. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't feel anger towards Tess, who burst into tears. Instead, my anger towards Zach was about to explode. It's okay, Tess. You didn't know anything, and I don't blame you. I didn't want to hurt you, but I thought we needed to clear things up. I'm sorry. I apologized while comforting Tess, who was sobbing. I knew it would hurt her. But if she had known the truth and acted indifferently, I would have wanted to blame her. I'm thinking of getting a divorce. What about you? I'll break up with him too. This cleared up my suspicions. Sylvia, I'm sorry even though I had no idea. You must have been hurt so badly. I'm really sorry. Seeing Tess crying as she apologized, I started to shed tears too. After a while, Tess calmed down, and we decided to talk about the future. I'm planning to file for divorce and claim alimony from Zach. Don't worry, I won't ask for any compensation from you. Sylvia. Thank you. Even though I'm in a position where I should be taking responsibility too. I'll break up with Zach too. Actually, I'm furious right now. Sylvia, I know it's weird for me to say this, but I'll provide plenty of evidence of the affair. Let's teach him a lesson. Seeing Tess's willingness to help me, despite being hurt herself, made me a bit envious of her. I put down my drink and reached out my hand to Tess.
Thank you. Let's do this. Yes.
Tess grasped my hand, and we exchanged a firm handshake. The next day, I decided to visit a lawyer's office just in case. If Zach didn't agree to the divorce, it might go to mediation. I wanted to be prepared for that possibility. After consulting with the lawyer with the evidence provided by the detective agency and Tess, the lawyer suggested that the evidence was sufficient and recommended sending a demand letter to proceed with the divorce. I agreed to proceed in that direction. 3 days later, Zach called as usual. I had been ignoring his calls, but this time it felt like the right moment to answer.
Hello? Finally, you answered my call. You've been ignoring me this whole time. I told you I don't want a divorce, so you have no choice but to come back. The house is a mess. We're getting complaints from the neighbors. It's all your fault. Come back now.
It seemed like he hadn't received the demand letter yet. Well, I guess it wouldn't be delivered so quickly anyway. I thought as I replied. I told you I want a divorce. Stop saying things that are convenient for you after ignoring me for so long. Besides, there are other things you're hiding from me. Hearing this, Zach began to falter.
What? What do you mean by things I'm hiding? I haven't done anything wrong.
Zach? It's been a while. While Zach was trying to say something, I passed the phone to Tess. At that moment, I was having tea with Tess, so I decided to let her take the call.
What? Tess? Is that you?
Zach's confusion was evident even over the phone.
Yep. Tess here. I was just having tea with your wife. What? My wife? What are you talking about, Tess? How pathetic. I know everything now. You've been deceiving me. And Sylvia told me about how you ignored her and about her illness. You really are the worst. It makes me sick to think that I ever dated a guy like you. Never show up in front of me again. Don't even contact me. Go to hell, you idiot.
Tess's expression and tone were unlike anything I'd seen or heard from her before. I thought to myself calmly about how scary Tess could be when she gets angry.
What's with you, Tess? You're different. Come on, be upbeat and positive like you always are. Shut up. Bye.
Then, Tess returned to her usual smiling, cute self and handed back the phone.
Here you go, Sylvia.
She had such a refreshed look on her face. Even I felt a bit better listening to her.
That's how it is. You understand, right? My lawyer should be in touch with you soon.
Hearing this, Zach's voice trembled, unable to hide his panic.
Your lawyer? No, you got it all wrong, Sylvia. Tess was just, well, a fling. You know, men often cheat. It was just something I tried out. Obviously, Sylvia, you're the most important one. And look, I wasn't ignoring you. Oh yeah, I've been having trouble with my hearing, so sometimes I couldn't catch what you were saying, so I might not have heard about the hospital thing or whatever. Tess and I are over now. You're the only one for me, Sylvia.
The more I listened, the more repulsed I felt by his words. And his shallow excuses almost made me press the button to end the call.
You know what? Being worthy as a man is about having the guts to see things through until the end, and being dependable. This means you, who lack all these qualities, are not even worthy enough to cheat on me. Well, I think anyone who cheats on their partner is a good-for-nothing guy anyway. Oh, don't contact me directly anymore. You'll have to go through my lawyer from now on. I mean, you're really disgusting. I don't want anything to do with you. Goodbye. Wait. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I won't ignore you anymore, and I'll stop cheating on you.
He continued saying something, but I had conveyed what needed to be said, so I hung up. I didn't want anything else from him. I looked at Tess, and she was smiling.
That was refreshing, wasn't it? Sylvia. Indeed. We're friends, aren't we?
Tess seemed on the verge of tears after hearing that. Oh, Sylvia. I'm sorry about all this. I really love you, Sylvia. Even though that man brings me painful memories, I'm grateful I could become friends with you through all this.
Tess, who embraced me while saying this, is still adorable to me, like a little sister. I went back home and told my parents what had happened. They seemed relieved. I apologized for making them worried about me, and they told me it's normal for family to worry about each other. After the demand letter was delivered, Zach had no choice but to reluctantly agree to the divorce. With overwhelming evidence, he couldn't make excuses and had to agree to pay the alimony. When the lawyer visited his house, it was reportedly in a terrible state, filled with garbage and a bad smell. So, the conversation was held outside. Apparently, there was a neighbor who overheard this, and since she was notorious for being a gossiper, word soon spread in the neighborhood. Zach returned to his parents' house when it became too difficult for him to stay there. Zach's parents contacted me later to apologize, and I learned that Zach had quit his job and spent his days cooped up in his parents' house. As for me, after the divorce was finalized, I reopened my cooking class and am enjoying my life. Tess quit her job at the cafe and decided to open her own shop. It had been a dream of hers for a long time. She even asked me to work with her, and I'm actively considering it. Looking back, I have no idea why I put up with such a life before. Part of me was afraid to make the choice to divorce, but I sometimes think that if I had known how stress-free and happy I would be when I finally did, I would have divorced sooner. Spending time with my parents now brings lots of laughter and joy every day.
Knowing you, you must have saved up quite a bit, right? How much do you have now? These fawning words came from my husband, who I've been with for many years. I sighed at his words. I didn't feel like responding, but I knew my persistent husband would keep asking until I answered. I have about $400,000 in the bank account, but remember, that money isn't for us to use freely. I warned him as such. But advising my husband is synonymous with meaninglessness. He never listens. Oh, really? I see. Satisfied, my husband disappeared from our home the next day with the bank account details and our seal. Fed up with my foolish husband, I picked up the divorce papers he left behind. Where did he disappear to? No, that doesn't matter. Rather, if I'm going to disappear, now's my chance. With that thought, I quickly took action. And so, my husband began desperately searching for me, who had vanished. My name is Sydney Logan, and my husband Floyd and I are nearing our golden wedding anniversary. We were blessed with 2 children, our daughter Eileen and son Eddie. Both graduated from college, got jobs, married, and started their own families. To outsiders, we must look like a happy family. But there's something that's been troubling me for years. It's about my husband. It was an arranged marriage. He was the son of my father's mentor. Honestly, I didn't have a great first impression of him. He was 2 years younger than me. Maybe that's why, but he seemed incredibly naive. He also seemed somewhat sloppy at first glance. Plus, he never listened to me, always talking about himself. During an arranged marriage meeting, it's essential to talk to get to know the other person. But his stories weren't interesting at all. At work, I'm entrusted with a lot of responsibilities. Things often don't run smoothly without me. That's why I end up working late. I need someone who understands that. My husband blurted out right from the start. I managed a wry smile, but honestly, I wanted to tell him that I did not like what he had said very much. As I searched for words, he pressed on. Well, you'll be the older one in the relationship, so you'll understand, right? Was this man, who only talked about himself and never listened to me, really planning to marry me? Is he serious? Well, I don't know about that. In front of our parents and his, I had no choice but to respond that way. I thought they would understand my reluctance. Yet, somehow, I ended up being extremely favored by my husband and his parents. My parents were also pleased. I found myself unable to say no. Back then, it wasn't uncommon to marry someone chosen by your parents. Plus, everyone was so happy about it. I thought maybe living together would reveal his good sides. So, I reluctantly agreed to marry him. After getting married, it's not that I didn't see his good qualities. True to his boasting, he was diligent at work. He went to work earnestly every day. While he didn't advance exceptionally fast, his salary steadily increased. We lived with my in-laws, and they were kind to me. Still, that was the only good thing I saw in my husband. But we were fortunate enough to live peacefully. However, after he turned 40, our expenses began to increase gradually. When I asked why, he said it was company tradition for superiors to treat their subordinates. I understood that, but at the time, our daughter Eileen was in college and our son Eddie was in high school. The expenses were so high that I had to dip into my savings for their tuition and living expenses. No matter how many times I told my husband, he'd say, "Aren't you managing it? Just handle it." He was oblivious to my desperate pleas. Moreover, both in-laws fell ill at the same time, and the burden of caring for them fell all on me. My husband left it all to me. Even when I suggested, "At least let's hire a helper," he coldly dismissed it, saying, "What are you here for? If you need extra hands, get Eileen and Eddie to help. Don't waste money." "So, could you at least help a little? Maybe a little help with your father when he eats," I proposed. But his response was disappointing. "Caregiving isn't my job. If I don't work and bring in money, we'll all be doomed." He always made plausible excuses, never offering any solutions. Instead, his nights out and expenses only increased. I never intended to burden the children with caregiving, but they often helped with chores, seeing my condition. Eventually, after my father-in-law passed away, my mother-in-law followed soon after. Though sad, I couldn't deny feeling relieved to be free from caregiving. Years passed. Our children graduated, got jobs, and moved out. My husband Floyd and I were left alone in this house. He retired about 5 years ago, but still, he frequently goes out drinking, leaving the house empty. And his spending was as bad as ever. One day, Fearing we'd run out of money if his wasteful spending continued, I spoke up. Floyd, you need to stop spending so much. Do you really need to go out drinking so often now that you're retired? We have our own lives to live. To my words, he frowned in confusion. Huh? I've worked hard all my life. I've got my retirement funds and pension. What's wrong with enjoying my freedom in my old age? I'm saying there's a limit. If we spend more than we have, we won't be able to survive. Let's worry about that when it happens. As usual, he never listens. I was utterly exasperated with him. A few days later, something happened. What are you looking at? My husband was staring at his mobile phone, frozen. While I was cleaning, I casually asked him, and he hurriedly hid his phone. I found it suspicious, but I had long lost any interest in him. Is he having an affair? No. Who would bother with a man like him who doesn't listen? Oh, nothing. He said that and put the phone down. I continued vacuuming, glancing at him sideways. Then he spoke to me. By the way, you said we didn't have money the other day, but knowing you must have saved up quite a bit, right? How much do you have now? I involuntarily looked at his face. He spoke in such a fawning manner. I was disgusted. There's none. You're always withdrawing it, so you should know. Not that. I mean like fixed deposits or other bank accounts. He tried to play it off, but I knew my persistent husband would keep asking until I answered. I was so fed up. I just blurted out. I have about $400,000 in a bank account, but that money isn't for us to use freely. If that's gone, we're really finished. I've warned him as such, but I knew warning my husband was pointless. Oh, really? I see, he said, looking satisfied. As much as it pains me to admit, this is my husband. I suspected he would soon start badgering me for that money. But my prediction was wrong. The next day, he disappeared with the bank account details and our seal. All he left was a divorce application. Such a heartless man. I wasted my life by spinning it with him. It wasn't an overstatement. Yet, he treated me so cruelly, running off with all our savings. He must have thought I didn't matter at all. He probably was having an affair. Thinking this, I vowed to take thorough revenge and stamped the divorce papers. Then I quickly took action. After all, he was the one who left the divorce papers. His intention with leaving that divorce application was clear. After submitting the divorce papers to City Hall and becoming officially single, I felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. I was about to inform my children and took out my mobile phone. That's when I noticed several missed calls. It was my husband. Well, now my ex-husband. I could imagine him calling in desperation, but I had no obligation to talk to him. Going back home would surely lead to an unwanted encounter. So I immediately contacted my daughter, Eileen. Hello, Eileen? Mom, what's wrong? I explained everything to her. How her father ran off with all the savings in our bank account, how I submitted the divorce papers, and how he was repeatedly calling me. Without questioning our divorce, Eileen quickly suggested, "Mom, come over to my place for now. It's better not to meet Dad." Grateful for her words, I headed to her house. But within 10 minutes of my arrival, the intercom at Eileen's rang. "What should we do? It must be Dad." "It's okay. Leave it to me." Eileen hid me in the bedroom and went to the door alone. "Dad, what's wrong?" I could hear her voice from the entrance. As expected, the visitor was my ex-husband. "Is Sydney here? I can't get a hold of her. Oh, and I wanted to ask how to use that bank account." "Calm down. What happened?" "That's the thing. I can't withdraw money from the bank. I need to talk to Sydney urgently." He said that to my daughter. He seemed quite panicked. It was about that, after all. Hearing my husband's frantic voice, I quietly listened to the conversation, a smile playing at the corners of my lips. "Can't withdraw money? Why?" Eileen asked, sounding surprised. Then he began to explain, albeit interruptedly. "It seems there's a theft report on the bank account. I said it's okay because I'm her husband, but they won't let me access it. It's in Sydney's name, so I need to contact her." I almost laughed at the desperation in his voice. Yes, after realizing the bank account was taken, I immediately reported it as stolen to the bank, making it inaccessible. Even as a spouse, without my permission, he couldn't use the account. And now, he wasn't even a spouse anymore. That money was no longer his right to use. He talked with my daughter for a while, but apparently left after receiving a phone call. I came out of the bedroom and thanked Eileen, who then said, "I figured out why Dad ran off with the bank account." I was taken aback by her words. Was there a conversation I hadn't heard? But it all made sense with that last phone call she received. The call had a shouting voice saying, "When will you pay it back?" It must mean Dad is in debt. Debt? I couldn't believe my ears. For what reason? When and from whom did he borrow money? He did all this without consulting me, and from the sounds of it, it wasn't from a reputable source. I knew he was foolish, but this was beyond my expectations. "We should warn Eddie. Dad might go there next, looking for you," my daughter suggested. Okay. Then I contacted my son. I told him not to engage with his father if he came, and reassured him that I was safe. He laughed and said, "Got it. That old man is finally getting what he deserves." It seemed the children had realized how selfish their father was. No wonder my daughter didn't question the divorce. "Don't worry, Mom. My sister and I are on your side," my son assured me. Once again, I felt a deep sense of relief and truly believed that getting divorced was the right decision. Even as my cell phone continued to ring with calls from my ex-husband, I turned it off. I stayed at my daughter's house that night, surrounded by her husband and my grandchildren, enjoying a pleasant evening. The next day, as soon as I turned on my cell phone, there was another incoming call. Thinking it was him again, I was about to dismiss it, but then I saw it was an unknown number. Relieved it wasn't my husband, I answered the call, and it turned out to be from the branch of the bank where I had opened that bank account. Is there a problem? Well, about the bank account theft report you made the other day, since yesterday, a suspicious man has been trying to access Miss Logan's account. We confirm the address, and we believe it's your husband. He insists on not leaving until the account is closed or released. The bank employee sounded troubled. I was astounded and apologized. Then I made a correction. We share the same current address, but we're divorced. I'm single, and I don't have a husband. I'll visit soon to update my name and address, but please don't comply with that man's request to close the account. The employee responded, "Understood. We'll safeguard your deposit. Rest assured." I forced myself to get up. I couldn't keep running away forever. It was time to confront my ex-husband. Accompanied by my daughter, I went to the bank. My ex-husband, ranting in a separate room, was brought out when we arrived. Seeing us, he stood up and shouted, "Hey, where were you yesterday? You didn't even answer the phone. Hurry up and cancel the bank account or make the payment." His arrogance was appalling, shouting at me like that. The bank staff, shocked, tried to calm him down. How could he not be embarrassed, causing such a scene? My daughter apologized to the staff and said we would take him home, asking for a moment. Hearing this, I spoke up. "No. What right do you have to say such things?" "What? I'm your husband. Aren't you supposed to listen to me?" I glared at my husband, who was still making such absurd statements. "You're the one who left the divorce papers, remember? I submitted them right away. We're strangers now. You have no right to take money from my bank account." My words made my husband turn red with anger. "What? Doing things on your own? Huh? Who's being selfish here? I hear you're in debt. I wasn't even aware of that. What have you been doing all this time? How did you know that?" At that moment, my husband turned pale. Then his cell phone rang again. Probably another call demanding repayment of the debt. But he didn't even try to answer it. I sighed at my pitiful husband. "The phone is ringing. Aren't you going to answer it?" Then, in a burst of anger, he retorted, "I'm about to answer it now." As he switched the phone to speaker, a voice came through. "Mr. Logan, when will you return the money?" Can you wait a bit longer? I'm at the bank right now." He muttered in a low voice, but the other end was unforgiving. "Is that so? Please hurry, or the interest will increase. Okay? Thank you." And then the call ended. We all fell silent. My husband couldn't even raise his head. My daughter and I sighed. Anyway, staying here will only trouble the bank staff. Let's go back home for now. Then withdraw the money. I'll go home if you do. My husband grumbled, but ultimately, he couldn't withdraw any money and slumped in defeat. "Come on, let's go home." Finally, after being prompted by my daughter, he slowly got up and reluctantly followed us. "How could you get into debt like this? Who did you borrow from?" My daughter scolded him in the car. He began to speak in a small voice. After he turned 40, he hated going home to caregiving discussions. To kill time after work, he started going to lottery ticket places and got addicted, continuing even after retirement without my knowledge. He didn't want to hear me nag him about money, and he knew if I found out it was because of gambling, I'd be even more critical. He wanted to do what he'd like without criticism, especially after retirement. Though he had some winnings, he eventually began borrowing money to gamble. He was checking his cell phone frequently because of the constant calls about repayment. I thought he might be having an affair, but this was even worse. I can't believe it. My own father. How shameful. My daughter expressed her genuine disdain for her father's actions. I felt the same. How much do you owe? One. You mean $10,000? My daughter asked. Then my husband raised his voice in a fit of rage. It's $100,000. It's not just $10,000. What are you being so defiant about, you old fool? What are you going to do now? Don't ask me for help. My daughter was finally furious. Understandable. A debt of $100,000? It's unforgivable that he created such a debt as a family man. And worse, he inquired about my savings, thinking that after divorcing and paying off his debts, he could use the remaining $300,000 freely without my interference. I was foolish. I'm sorry, my husband said, bowing his head. But there's no cure for such an idiot. It's too late for apologies. We're strangers now. I don't know you. I said just that. After arriving home, I packed my things. My husband followed me around like a lost puppy. I'm really sorry. Please don't go. Don't abandon me. He begged, clinging to me. But he was the one who initially tried to abandon me. If you had managed to run off with my $400,000 as planned, what did you think would happen to me? With that, my husband was at a loss for words. It was the proof that he had never thought about me at all. I had no intention whatsoever of helping my husband. Goodbye. Selling this house should cover the debt repayment, I suppose. Good luck. My husband continued to desperately apologize, trying to stop me from leaving. But his words didn't resonate with me. I was a bit scared by my own lack of emotion towards him. But after all, my words had never touched him either. It was the same for both of us. I returned to my daughter's house again in her car. Finally freed from my pathetic husband, I started a new life. Later, under the guise of discussing the division of assets post-divorce, a lawyer hired by my ex-husband came to see me. Such a foolish man. He could have just sold the house quietly instead of wasting money on a lawyer. The lawyer conveyed my ex-husband's claim that the $400,000 should be split in half, and so should the debt. But things wouldn't go as he imagined. The debt was incurred by him alone, without my knowledge. I have no obligation to accept it. Even the lawyer seemed exasperated. I did try to explain that to him. I guess my ex-husband never listened properly to anyone. As for the $400,000, it's money I saved and invested before we were married. It was not communal property, but my own. The bank transaction history is proof. I informed the lawyer of this. Then he asked me, "Isn't there any shared property?" There might be about $5,000 in savings, but the main shared asset would be the house. We built it after we got married, and it was a large house because we lived with his parents. The mortgage was quite a burden. So, the house will be split, he concluded with a wry smile. I gave the lawyer a big smile. Thank you for handling this. Eventually, the house was sold, and I received half of the proceeds as part of the property division. I told him to sell the house and pay off his debts. I didn't want the children to be burdened if he passed away with the debts remaining. Honestly, I hadn't planned to take any money from the house sale, but it was his greed that led to this. He shouldn't have proposed the property division. I just followed his wishes and went through the proper legal procedures. Both my daughter and son laughed heartily when they heard about it. The $100,000 debt included exorbitant interest. So I had the lawyer intervene, and it seems my ex-husband somehow managed to pay off the debt. I don't know what's become of him now, having lost his house, savings, and family. But if he has no remaining debts, it doesn't matter to me. Nothing good comes from being involved with such a person. My son also decided to cut ties with his father. A sensible decision, I believe. He's now renting an apartment and working day-to-day jobs. He should work hard, as it is the consequence of his actions. Meanwhile, my daughter offered me to live with her. Spending my days with my grandchildren and daughter is a joy. Her husband is kind and shows interest in the investments I used to manage, making for great conversations. This environment feels like heaven compared to my past life, where complaints were common. Marrying my husband, the only good thing was being blessed with my son and daughter. Knowing they are happy now makes me feel that all my efforts were worth it. Now it's my turn. No matter the age, life can be changed. I want to be happy for the rest of my life, making up for the time lost.
I'm Maya, 35 years old. I work part-time to support my busy husband while also being a homemaker. My husband, Sam, is a bit older than me and is a laid-back kind of person. We've been together for over 6 years and we've hardly ever had a real fight. Both of us moved from rural areas to the city, so our parents live quite far away. I first met Sam's family when we went to formally announce our engagement. We didn't see much of each other after that because we quickly had our engagement and wedding ceremonies. There were no issues during that time. In fact, my mother-in-law Karen and sister-in-law Maribel seemed delighted, saying things like, "We're so happy our son is marrying such a lovely girl." My parents were also relieved by how well things were going. I remember that my parents were also relieved to see that. I thought I was getting along well with my in-laws, but I started to suspect something was off during our first extended holiday visit after getting married. Karen had called beforehand to ask, "I'd like to prepare some special dishes. Could you tell me what you like and dislike?" Touched by her thoughtfulness, I told her, "I love fish, but I'm not a fan of shellfish." However, the dinner on the first day of our visit was all about shrimp and crab, my least favorites. I was surprised but assumed Karen had misunderstood. It's not like I'm allergic. Sam even said, "Maya doesn't like shellfish, so let's have something else tomorrow." Karen apologized, saying, "I'm sorry I misunderstood when you told me over the phone." But while I was busy helping Sam with his crab, I looked up and saw Karen smirking at me. That's when it hit me. Was she doing this on purpose? After Sam's comment, no shellfish appeared during our stay. But neither did any fish dishes. Then came the next extended holiday. Again, Karen called to ask about my food preferences. Remembering last time, I said, "I like anything except shellfish." While shellfish was served, other dishes were also available, so it wasn't a big deal. But during our stay, I noticed other annoying things. Like the water heater being turned off while I was in the bath, or footprints on my boots. When I asked Karen, she gave vague excuses like, I didn't know you were in the bath, or I accidentally stepped on them. I wasn't convinced, but before I could say anything, Mirabelle, who's close to Karen, glared at me saying, Are you saying Mom did this on purpose? Behind her, Karen acted as if she were the victim. Even my usually clueless father-in-law Leroy said, Is something wrong with Mom? That's when I knew for sure. This was harassment. During the next extended holiday, I was reluctant to visit Sam's family. I told Sam, Karen is being mean to me. Really? My mom? Sam, even more clueless than me, couldn't believe it. I remembered what Leroy had said last year. I think Karen won't like it, though. I had an idea to make the oblivious Sam understand. I'm going to call Karen now, so listen carefully to what I say. I called Karen on my mobile phone and put it on speaker so Sam could hear. Hi, Karen. I've been feeling queasy lately when I eat beef. It would be great if you could avoid serving it during our next extended holiday. All right. After hanging up, Sam looked puzzled. Weren't you eating beef ribs just yesterday? Sam still didn't seem to get it. Remember this conversation until the next time we visit home. Then came the long holiday weekend. The dinner table at my in-laws was extravagant. Steak, pot roast, beef stroganoff. The endless parade of beef dishes was disappointing, to say the least. But the one who looked stunned at the menu was Sam. It seemed he finally understood how Karen and Mirabelle had been treating me. Wow, this is quite the spread, said Leroy, who was clueless. I went all out, Karen replied. Good for you, big bro, all your favorites, Mirabelle chimed in. Karen and likely co-conspirator Mirabelle exchanged knowing smiles. I was pondering how to address the situation when Sam beat me to it. He grabbed my arm and stood up. Mom, so you really have been harassing Maya. Karen and Mirabelle panicked at Sam's unexpected change of tone. What are you talking about? That's not true. Yeah, big bro. Mom prepared all this lavish food for your wife, didn't she? I heard you on the phone, Mom. Maya told you she can't eat beef. I thought it was a misunderstanding at first, but now it's clear you did this on purpose. Karen and Mirabelle's faces turned pale. Let's go. Oh, wait a minute. Mom, Mirabelle, explain yourselves, demanded Leroy, usually so gentle and smiling, now glaring at them. Ignoring the shouting and crying, we left my in-laws' house. On the way home, a calmer Sam apologized repeatedly. We agreed not to visit his family for a while. Knowing how much he loved his kind mother and adorable sister, I felt that was enough. Leroy also sent a letter saying we didn't have to see them until they genuinely reflected on their actions. He even included gift certificates. So peaceful days without visiting my in-laws passed by. Then we got news that kind Leroy had collapsed. Sam was torn about visiting them, but I encouraged him to go, and we both headed to the hospital. We met Karen and the others for the first time in a year and went into Leroy's room. He seemed stable, but his recovery depended on rehab. Seeing his weakened father, Sam looked defeated. Thinking about how Sam had stayed away from his family to protect me, my heart ached. After seeing Leroy, we felt a bit relieved. There's a great eel restaurant nearby. You like fish, don't you, Maya? Karen asked as we left the room, trying to gauge our mood. I was surprised she remembered my preferences. We haven't had much appetite since Dad collapsed. We want to build up our strength for tomorrow, Mirabelle added. We agreed to go out to eat, thinking it would be fine since there would be no other people around. The eel was delicious. Under different circumstances, we would have enjoyed it wholeheartedly. Karen kept asking, "Is it good? Want to order the grilled one too?" Mirabelle was also in high spirits. "I'm so happy to have a meal with you guys." The atmosphere was so much more pleasant than before. It was unsettling. As we left the restaurant and headed for the station, we ran into one of Sam's classmates. It seemed there was a local get-together that night. Sam was going to decline, but I could tell he was tempted when he heard it was with old friends from his hometown. Why not join them? You can stay at our place tonight, if Maya is okay with it. Karen and Mirabelle looked at me. I was not heartless enough to say no. After all, Sam has been down lately and hasn't seen friends because we've been away from his hometown. Go ahead and have some fun. You need a break, I told him. Sam seemed surprised I was encouraging him, but he decided to go after his classmates insisted. Karen and Mirabelle have been behaving, so they must be remorseful. One day should be manageable. I was too optimistic, letting my guard down over a half-day event. I'd soon learn the hard way that people don't change so easily. Sam left with his classmates for the restaurant, and we headed back to my in-laws' house. "Maya, let's have dinner." Karen calls me into the living room. The food on the table looked fine, so I was relieved. "I forgot. I have a watermelon cooling outside. Could you bring it in?" "Sure," I reply. I didn't feel like I was being used, so I agreed. I open the front door and head to the yard. There's a watermelon by the faucet, soaking in water and looking chilled. As I'm thinking this, I hear a click behind me. A bad feeling washes over me. I try to open the front door, but it's locked. "I didn't think we'd get a chance for payback so soon," a snide voice says. I turn to see two faces pressed against the living room window, grinning. Memories from a year ago flood back. These people haven't changed. "You tricked me! You're the one who tricked us. Was it fun monopolizing our son?" I just showed Sam the truth. "That's called being a poor sport. It's unfair to involve men in women's fights," Mirabelle says, smirking. If you're talking about unfair, 2 against 1 is even more so. "If you'd been more humble and apologized for that day, we'd let you in," Karen says, looking down on me. "Why should I apologize? I haven't done anything wrong." "But you kept my brother from seeing our dad. Isn't that cruel?" I'm at a loss for words. I had felt guilty about Sam avoiding his family to protect me. "If you want to come in, apologize for your past actions, listen to your mother-in-law, and clear up your husband's misunderstanding. Got it?" Karen says, then closes the curtain and leaves. I'm left standing there, staring at the lights in the house. Was I wrong? If I had been more tolerant, would Sam have seen Leroy more? Laughter comes from inside the house, as if mocking me. No, that's not it. If Karen and Mirabelle hadn't harassed me, neither Sam nor Leroy would have had to feel lonely. No matter how unpleasant they are, they're still Sam's family. I was willing to forgive if they showed remorse, but I've reached my limit. If they want to fight, then let's have one. To signal my counterattack, I rang the doorbell over and over. "Karen, Mirabelle, open up!" I yelled, pounding on the door. Of course, they didn't come out, but I sensed the door of the house across the street opening. I turned to see a kind-looking woman staring at me quizzically. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. I'm their daughter-in-law. They told me to sleep outside tonight." The woman quickly helped me up from where I was about to lie down in despair. When asked to explain the situation, he weakly explains what happened so far. Turns out she's the mother of Sam's childhood friend and is close to Karen. She was initially shocked by Karen and Mirabelle's harassment, but believed me when she saw my sweaty, exhausted state. She offered to go confront Karen with me, but I was afraid of retaliation without my husband. I wanted to go to the restaurant where he was. Her son was also at the gathering, so she took me there. Sam was shocked to see me disheveled and sweaty, a victim of Karen and Mirabelle's harassment. "I'm sorry. If I hadn't gone out, this wouldn't have happened." "It's not your fault. I told you it was okay." The real culprits are those two who harassed us even at the expense of Leroy and Sam. 6 of Sam's classmates were at the gathering, and I was embarrassed to be there in my disheveled state. But they were all kind, getting angry on my behalf and comforting me. They even ordered food and beer for me, which revitalized my tired body. As Sam and I were about to leave to confront them, one of Sam's female friends made a suggestion. The plan was for me to stay at her place while Sam returned home alone. When Sam asked, "What about my wife?" the idea was to gauge their reaction. It seemed like a good way to collect evidence and assess their level of remorse, so Sam and I agreed. Around 11 p.m., the gathering broke up. I stayed at Sam's friend's house while he returned home. The next morning, as planned, I returned to find Sam at the front door. Next to him stood a deflated Karen and Mirabelle. They seemed relieved to see me, but quickly turned furious. "We were worried sick. We stayed up all night waiting for you." Karen lunged at me. Apparently, Sam hadn't told them where I was. "Ah, but you're the one who locked me out." "That's ridiculous. You probably went out manhunting." So that's their game. They planned to lie since they thought they had no evidence. Or maybe they thought my heart would quickly break and I would apologize. According to Sam, after locking me out, they had drinks and forgot all about me. When Sam came home, he panicked and looked in the garden, only to find that his wife wasn't there. Sam lied on the spot, saying I went out and hadn't returned. Their thoughtless actions were so absurd, I almost laughed. "Karen, remember the doorbell camera you were so proud of? It should have recorded me ringing multiple times," I said. "What?" Karen looked dumbfounded. Had she forgotten about her high-tech monitor while busy harassing me? "Mom, the neighbor across the street saw Maya trying to sleep in the yard. She knows everything. I came back alone to see your reaction," Sam said. Karen and Mirabelle paled, realizing their harassment was now public knowledge. "Instead of reflecting on your actions when Maya went missing, you blame her? That's so low it's beyond tears," Sam said. "Unbelievable. I'll never forgive how you treated Maya. Don't expect us to ever come back to this house. Sam!" Karen and Mirabelle let out cries of anguish as their beloved son turned his back on them. Ignoring them, we leave my in-laws' house behind. True to our word, we never returned. The only concern was Leroy, but when his health stabilized, he chose a rehab facility near where we live. Leroy was also disappointed in their actions and didn't want to see them for a while. Sam seems happy to be able to help with Leroy's rehab. After our declaration to cut ties, Sam's face, which had been clouded with anger and sadness, has recently brightened, which is a relief. I also enjoy Leroy's kind and humorous company, and we chat from time to time. Meanwhile, my in-laws have become infamous in the neighborhood as the family that harasses their daughter-in-law. Sam's neighborhood friends and their mothers have been spreading the word about how I've been treated. Karen and Mirabelle had good public images, so some people couldn't believe it at first. But the vivid stories from friends and eyewitness accounts of arguments at the front door in the early morning added credibility. Karen and Mirabelle are now socially isolated and mostly stay at home. They occasionally send texts of apology or excuses to Sam and Leroy. But there's not a single word of apology to me, so it doesn't seem like they're truly remorseful. Not that I'm in the mood to forgive them anyway. As for me, I've gotten into camping since then. I never planned to go back to a place with such toxic people, but I thought it might come in handy for survival in case of a disaster. Once I started collecting camping gear and actually going camping, I quickly fell in love with it. Seeing me propose a camping trip for the upcoming long weekend, Sam gives me a complex smile. Sam is also getting into camping, influenced by me. You're pretty resilient, aren't you? Do you dislike a resilient wife? Of course not. I welcome it. And so, with my resilience and my easygoing, kind husband, we continue to enjoy our harmonious, married life.
Didn't you get money from the adults around you?
What should we do if they ask us for money too? I attended a family meeting with the parents of my fiancé, who holds an executive position at an IT company. There, I was met with cold words and they opposed our marriage. I lost my parents when I was a child, and my brother Elwin raised me with all his might. Hearing harsh words about my brother, I was deeply shocked. Just because I don't have parents, they assume it's not a decent family environment.
If it's a marriage opposed by the parents, I can't go through with it. We can't see each other anymore.
Even my fiancé, whom I trusted, easily abandoned me. I was plunged into the depths of despair, but...
What do you mean by this?
My fiancé's family ended up facing terrible consequences. I am Emmeline. My mom had been battling illness before I was born. After giving birth, her condition worsened, and she passed away when I was a first grader. Even in her bedridden state, the warmth of Mom hugging me while saying,
Emmeline,
is unforgettable, even now as an adult. During my elementary school years, my dad, though clumsy, raised me. He even tried hard to make lunch boxes for me to take to school.
Dad, what's this?
Scrambled eggs. Don't they look tasty this time?
They're incredibly salty.
Startled, Dad tasted the scrambled eggs and choked on their saltiness. He had confused salt with sugar. That was the kind of dad he was. Apologizing, he tried to finish eating it, looking both unreliable yet amusing. There were times I wished for more attention, but then my much older brother would play with me, even tired after his club activities.
Emmeline, try the scrambled egg.
What he offered was fluffy and appetizing scrambled eggs. My brother, who had been practicing beside our clumsy dad, quickly improved his cooking and household skills, acquiring basic life skills within a year. In absence of Mom, my clumsy dad provided laughter, and my hard-working brother gave me a sense of security. However, Dad also passed away in a car accident during a business trip in my 6th grade winter.
I had just started learning household chores, wanting to repay Dad for everything by the time I became an adult. Our normal life shattered in an instant.
Christmas, we're going on a family trip. Lucky, my mom and dad are working, so I'll be home alone.
That's awful. They should be with you on Christmas.
Hearing my classmates' conversation made my heart ache. Even such conversations were impossible for me. Even if they were working, other kids' parents would come home. I couldn't look forward to trips or wait for someone's return. The only family photo we had was taken a few days after I was born. I cried every night, overwhelmed by a sadness too big for an elementary school student.
It's okay to cry all you want when you feel like it,
my brother would say, hugging me. He never showed me a sad face. But I once heard him sobbing in the living room at night. He was a 12th grader then, probably suffering too, but he always smiled in front of me and patted my head. While increasing his part-time work days, he took care of household chores like cooking and laundry.
Emmeline, dinner's ready. Let's eat.
He always made sure I never had to eat alone at our 4-person table. In middle school, I sometimes found his behavior a bit annoying, but remembering him crying secretly, I couldn't bring myself to rebel. After graduating high school, he found a job and supported me. I tried to reduce his burden by eagerly doing what household chores I could. Though we lost our parents, my brother's care filled the void, and I gradually stopped feeling lonely. Having worked hard on household chores since childhood, I easily adapted to living independently when I started working. All thanks to my brother, who taught me everything step by step. I worked hard at my job to make my brother proud. Thanks to that, I achieved good results and earned praise from my supervisor. One day, I heard about a cross-industry networking event. My supervisor suggested I attend as a company representative.
Getting various experiences while you're young is good. It will surely help you in the future. I have high expectations for you, Emmeline.
Encouraged by his words, I happily decided to participate.
Big brother, I've been chosen as the representative for the next networking event.
I always reported my work achievements to my brother immediately. Then my brother would always praise me.
That's amazing. You're always working hard. But don't overdo it, okay?
After praising me, he would always send a message concerned about my health, which made me happy and was the reason I always kept in touch.
Nice to meet you. I look forward to working with you today.
Nice to meet you too. I'm looking forward to today as well.
At the cross-industry networking event, I met a man named Kennard. While I worked in the apparel industry, he worked in IT.
People in the apparel industry are always so stylish. I'm pretty indifferent to that stuff.
Not at all. You look quite fashionable yourself. That jacket suits you very well.
Huh? I'm glad to hear that. I put extra effort into dressing up for today's event.
Our meeting was a unique encounter at the networking event, and we quickly developed a close rapport. After the event, we met several times and eventually started dating, drawn to each other's personalities. Kennard worked for one of the most famous and thriving companies in town, and his dad was an executive there, making them very wealthy. I was worried he'd be shocked by my vastly different upbringing, but when I told him my parents had passed away, he accepted it without any change.
You have a tough time since you were young. Thank you for sharing that with me.
His words were as kind, as warm as the ones my brother gave me when our dad died, soothing my heart. On our days off, we watch movies at each other's houses, cook meals, and go on picnics, enjoying both indoor and outdoor activities together. Kennard was the first man besides my brother with whom I could spend time laughing.
Will you marry me?
On our way back from a Christmas dinner, in front of the Christmas lights, Kennard proposed to me. My Christmases, which had felt paused since 6th grade, suddenly transformed into something vibrant.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
I promise to make you
As Kennard said this, he hugged me with such joy.
It was a moment when I truly felt the joy of happiness in Kennard's arms. Brother, there's something I want to talk to you about. Since my brother was busy with work, we mostly communicated through emails and calls. But I felt this news was something to share in person, so I invited him over.
It's been a while. What's up? It's my first time being formally invited, so I'm a bit nervous.
My brother, who came to my house, seemed a bit different than usual. I was nervous, but he seemed even more so. Yeah, actually, I'm going to marry Kennard, whom I've been dating. My brother looked surprised, an expression I'd never seen before, and suddenly started crying. Oh, brother, what's wrong?
No, it's just my little Emmeline getting married. I'm so happy. Congratulations. Truly, congratulations.
Although I had heard my brother cry when Dad died, it was the first time I saw him cry.
You must be happy, okay?
Wiping his tears. My brother's words resonated deeply, overlapping with Kennard's. When the date for our family meeting with Kennard's parents was set, my heart became restless. How should I talk to his parents? It had been over a decade since I last spoke to my own parents, so speaking with his made me even more nervous. I received lots of advice from friends and seniors at work, dressed in a slightly formal dress, and visited Kennard's family home. Kennard's parents initially seemed very strict, and honestly, I was a bit scared. But thanks to Kennard speaking highly of me, that impression quickly changed. Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to meet today. I'm Emmeline. I look forward to working with you.
Nice to meet you. Oh, you're very beautiful.
I was so nervous during the greeting that my facial muscles seemed to stop working. But Kennard's mother received me warmly.
Kennard will be entrusted with important positions in the company from now on. Please support him by his side.
Kennard, looking quite embarrassed, but seeing him expectedly by his parents was impressive and enviable.
So, what are Emmeline's parents like?
During a pleasant conversation, Kennard's father asked the most nerve-wracking question. I couldn't lie, so I told him everything truthfully. Mom passed away from illness when I was in first grade, and Dad died in an accident 5 years later. I heard Mom loved to draw. Kennard's parents looked at each other in shock.
How did you manage to live after that?
I have an older brother. He started working right after high school graduation and raised me. I owe my ability to do household chores to him. I always knew how grateful I was to my brother, but putting it into words made me realize how great he truly was. But that moment of sentiment was short-lived.
What? You live with just your brother? Forgive my bluntness, but wasn't it a poor life?
I was taken aback by their reaction. At the mention of poor made me feel the difference in our upbringings. Yes, I live with my brother. It might not have been luxurious, but he worked hard to provide a stable home so I wouldn't feel deprived. I could easily sense the friendly atmosphere from Kennard's parents had faded.
Living with just a brother without an adult's guidance? I can't imagine it was a proper environment.
When my brother and I were left alone, many adults offered help.
It's kind of you to say, but we needed to become independent as soon as possible. So we did everything we could on our own.
My brother refused their offers and chose a tough path. I was a bit angry to hear their judgment of his decision, but I tried to stay calm, considering they were Kennard's parents. Yet, they continued with their harsh words.
Did you really live like that? Or did you get money from adults around you?
Right, there's no way you could live on the money earned right after high school. What if they ask us for money too?
It was hard to listen silently to such terrible accusations. I looked at Kennard for help, but he was completely crestfallen.
I'm sorry, but a girl from such a poor background is not suitable for a Kennard. We can't approve of this marriage.
Kennard is a promising young man with a future. Don't hold him back.
I could tolerate their insults against me, but it was unbearable to hear them dismiss the hard work and dedication of my brother, who had tirelessly supported their family. I noticed Kenneth finally lifted his head.
Emmeline, I'm sorry. I can't marry someone my parents oppose.
His words of promising happiness seemed meaningless, and I was stunned.
Why you're still here? Leave now.
Kenneth grabbed my arm and forcibly led me to the entrance.
We can't see each other anymore.
The door closed. Standing under the cold sky, I looked down at the belongings dumped at the doorstep. What is happiness, really? Muttering this, I called my brother on the way home. Brother, the wedding is off.
I'll hear the details later. For now, come to my place, okay?
Being alone felt frightening, like everything Dad and my brother had protected was collapsing. When I arrived at my brother's house, sandwiches and scrambled eggs he hurriedly made were laid out on the table.
Let's eat first.
It had been a while since I ate my brother's cooking. It was warm, and tears naturally fell. After calming down, I told him about the incident at Kennard's house. My brother showed an anger I had never seen before.
I need to make a phone call. Relax for a while, Emmeline.
He briskly took his mobile phone and disappeared into another room. Drinking the warm tea he offered, I felt at ease and eventually fell asleep on the sofa. What's this? So heavy. When I woke up, a large blanket was heaped upon me. My brother must have covered me with blankets so I wouldn't catch a cold. Even so, this is too much. I smiled, but soon sleepiness overtook me again, and I slept till morning. For a while, I commuted from my brother's house. It took quite some time, but driving a different car than usual felt refreshing. When I returned home, I cooked dinner with my brother. Sharing a meal with him after so long felt nostalgic, and his kindness seemed to heal the wounds inflicted by Kennard's family. Today's meal was delicious too. I was content with a delicious meal when my mobile phone rang. It was Kennard. I initially ignored it, wondering what he wanted now, but he kept calling persistently, so I answered. What do you want? Calling so many times? What is it now?
It's not what. My dad and I have been transferred to a subsidiary in the countryside. What's going on?
Honestly, I didn't understand what he meant. Transferred? Why are you asking me that? My brother signaled me to let him talk. I switched the phone to speaker mode and put it on the table. Then my brother spoke calmly.
I've taken over the call. This is Emily's brother. To put it simply, I've informed your company's president that our company is terminating its partnership with yours. What? What do you mean? Do I need to simplify it further? Our company is providing $1 million in financial aid and had a technical partnership with your company. We are ending that.
My brother, who had worked tirelessly since high school graduation, had put effort into corporate know-how and networking. He co-founded a company and now manages it, which has grown to operate both domestically and internationally. The call was handed over to Kennard's father.
What does ending the partnership have to do with us being transferred? It has everything to do with. I told him we won't deal with a company that looks down on people for being raised by a sibling and deems it an improper environment.
My brother spoke calmly, but his calmness bore a quiet anger.
I'm sorry for what I said. Won't you give Kennard and me another chance? Emmeline, I'm really sorry, please.
They must have been on speaker too. Both apologized in turns, and I could hear them sobbing, but I felt nothing. It seemed like they were only apologizing because they were worried about their situation, And a wound once inflicted doesn't heal with an apology. It was too late for apologies. My brother looked at me. Seeing my refusal, he returned to his usual kind smile.
Without considering Emmeline's feelings? What are you talking about? There's nothing more to discuss. And we won't be meeting again. Goodbye.
My brother.
Wait a minute!
The call was cut as they tried to say something more.
It's necessary to cut off bad relationships.
Later, through my brother, I heard that Kennard's family had sold their house and disappeared. Maybe they thought they could escape to where my brother couldn't reach them, or to a place where their bad reputation hadn't spread. I didn't know. My brother's company operates everywhere, so no matter where they run, it's the same.
In the end, they're just running from reality. Running won't change anything.
Hearing this from my brother, who didn't run from our tough situation and aim for independence, made his words resonate. My brother looked radiant. Thank you, brother.
It's only natural to protect family. Oh, want dessert?
Yes.
All right, wait a moment. I'll prepare it.
As I got up to follow my brother to the kitchen, I silently spoke to myself. I will definitely grasp happiness for myself.
Huh? Did you say something?
No, nothing. I'll help you, so let's eat soon. I got up to follow my brother. Brother, one day, I will become strong and kind like you. So then, you can rely on me completely. Cry when you want to. I resolved to become a sister my brother can lean on, setting this as my goal for life.
My name is Jessica. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. Since my husband Bob, who is 2 years younger than me, was transferred, we've been temporarily living with his parents. I stress, it's only temporary. Bob seems to enjoy living in his childhood home, but I am eager to find our own place and move out as quickly as possible. This is because I simply can't get along with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law. She was always a nasty person, even before our marriage, but after living together, her attitude is more harsh than before.
Jessica, haven't you gone shopping yet? You missed the supermarket's early bird sale. You can't even shop efficiently. Tisk, tisk.
I work from home with my company's permission, but I'm still working during weekdays. There's no way I could make time for my shopping at the supermarket's early bird sale time. Mother-in-law, as I've said many times, I work during the day, so I can't go shopping until after 5 p.m. Every time I say this, my mother-in-law criticizes me.
Here she goes, so arrogant. Can't even have a child.
Bob and I don't have children. We haven't specifically checked at the hospital, so we don't know who is to blame. I wanted a child, but considering Bob's income, we couldn't afford the expensive fertility treatments. Even before moving in together, I was distressed by my mother-in-law's nasty remarks, but it was better when we were living separately. Living under the same roof day and night, I am exposed to her nasty remarks 24/7. My father-in-law doesn't directly make snide remarks, but he irritates me in a different way. He seems to believe that women over 30 years old are old lady, and treats me, a 35-year-old woman, as such.
Hey, old lady, get me the ashtray. Why are you wearing a skirt? No one wants to see your legs.
I want to tell him, if I'm an old lady, what does that make you, who's turning 60? I'm not a pushover either, so I retort each time they make rude remarks about me. But that only leads to further deterioration of our relationship as they consider it bossy. There is always a tense atmosphere in the house, and I was already feeling the limit of living together. However, after the transfer, Bob started working more on weekends and going on more business trips, so we couldn't discuss moving out. Jessica, I have another business trip this weekend. Again? You just went on a business trip. This new branch seems to have a lot of business trips. Before his transfer, although he had to work overtime, there were hardly any weekend work or business trips. Can't be helped, right? The work changes with the workplace. Sure, things change when jobs change, But isn't this a bit much? Thanks to this, we are not even able to find a place to move, even though we were supposed to live with my in-laws temporarily. What if we had to live with my in-laws for a long time? I was afraid of that. But then, one day, something happened. As I was removing laundry from Bob's bag after his business trip, I found a piece of paper in his bag's pocket. It turned out to be a printout of an online booking from a travel website. I figured it was just the flight and hotel booking for his business trip, but when I read it more closely, I couldn't believe my eyes. There was a hotel reservation that included tickets to Disneyland for 2 people, and the date was yesterday. That is the day Bob was on a business trip. Of course, Bob's company has nothing to do with Disneyland. Sure, they deal in seafood, but that's as close as they get to Disneyland. It doesn't matter. This means that Bob was pretending to go on a business trip, when in fact, he was visiting Disneyland for 2 days. And the fact that the hotel reservation was for 2 people? There's no doubt he was with a woman. As I was reeling from the shock, I heard Bob humming in the shower. It's a small world after all. The well-known theme song of a famous ride. He must have been reminiscing about Disneyland and humming unconsciously. But it seems that attractions are not important in a fun and enjoyable affair trip. I was so angry that I was ready to charge into the bathroom and confront Bob. But just then, Bob's phone rang. I was too enraged to think clearly, so I answered the call without thinking. Hello? Hello? For a moment, I heard a young woman's voice, and then the call was abruptly cut off. Could it be? I was convinced. The call just now was no doubt from the woman Bob went to Disneyland with. In other words, Bob's mistress. When she heard my voice answering Bob's phone, she must have panicked and hung up. I checked the call history on his smartphone. Bob isn't really security conscious, so he doesn't bother to set a decent password. I figured his passcode would probably be his 4-digit birth date. And bingo! The phone was unlocked in no time. But looking through his smartphone made my head spin. Evidence of his infidelity was pouring out of it, unmistakable and overwhelming. The image files were full of selfies of him and a young woman. The dates the photos were taken were all days when Bob had been on business trips or working on his days off. I was amazed at his recklessness, even leaving pictures of their intimate moments. Looking at the call history again, I saw the name Melissa Smith, so I searched for the same name in his WhatsApp friends list and opened the chat screen. Bob, I love you. I want to be your wife soon. This woman, Melissa, seems to be hoping to marry Bob. A homewrecker, perhaps? As I was mulling this over, Bob came out of the bathroom. Ah, that's refreshing. Facing Bob, who came out nonchalantly, drying his hair with a towel, I confronted him right away. Refreshed, huh? Seems like you're feeling pretty refreshed in a lot of ways. Huh? Who is Melissa Smith? At the mention of his mistress's name, Bob flinched. So it's true. You've been lying about going on business trips, and instead, you've been going on trips alone with this woman, Melissa Smith? Were all your business trips and working days off just lies? Unforgivable. Why do you... How on earth? I pointed my smartphone at the upset Bob. All the evidence is right here in this smartphone. Hey, did you go snooping through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. It's laughable that a man who's morally bankrupt enough to cheat can complain about privacy invasion. If you don't want it looked at, set a better password. Before we got married, I made a promise with Bob that he'd absolutely not cheat. I had declared to Bob that if he cheated, I'd leave him right away. Of course, my feelings haven't changed. I can't continue a marital life with a man who's playing around with another woman. Let's get a divorce. When I simply said that, Bob surprisingly agreed without objection. Yeah, I guess so. It was unexpected. I thought he would resist more. Was he ready for divorce once he was caught cheating? I'll get the divorce papers tomorrow. You tell your mom and dad. Got it. Bob's agreement was astonishingly nonchalant. However, once a declaration has been issued, it cannot be withdrawn, and it has no intention of doing so. Is this goodbye to married life? I felt a tinge of loneliness. The next day, I left the house early in the morning to get the divorce papers from the city office and to take care of some other errands. By the time I got home, it was already late at night. There in the house, my husband and his parents were waiting for me.
So you finally come back. We were wondering how long you were going to wander around.
The moment she saw me, my mother-in-law began to make snide remarks. Bob being present here means she should already know about Bob's cheating and our divorce. Isn't there something she should say, like an apology, before making a snide comment? But instead of an apology, my mother-in-law said something unbelievable. Well, it doesn't matter. At least you're finally leaving. We don't want to see your face anymore, so it's just as well you've been gone all day. What do you mean? With a smug smile, my mother-in-law responded to my question. Exactly as I said. I'm sick and tired of seeing your face. Finally, Bob has returned home, and you were just in the way. You're always back-talking, without any hint of charm, even when I tried to make you uncomfortable enough to leave. It took so long for you to get the hint. I finally had to resort to my ace in the hole. Ace in the hole? My mother-in-law gave a satisfied smile. You already know the name of Bob's girlfriend, right? Yes, something like Smith. Why was she checking if I knew the name of Bob's mistress? You see, I have a friend from my book club, Mrs. Smith. Her daughter is such a well-mannered, charming young lady. She's 10 years younger than you, only 25. At that age, she can have kids easily. Then my mother-in-law dropped a bomb. So I introduced Mrs. Smith's daughter to Bob. Excuse me? I was shocked. I never expected my mother-in-law to say something like this to me. Are you saying, mother-in-law, you arranged Bob's affair? Oh, arranged sounds so scandalous. I simply introduced them. I was completely taken aback by my mother-in-law, proudly talking about her own wrongdoings. I can't believe that a mother would induce her own son to cheat on her. And she is so proud to tell her son's wife about it. What a horrible mother. Well, I had no other choice. Bob is our only child. We need an heir. I would have even accepted you as my daughter-in-law if you'd had children. But all you did was work, never having any children. Next to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law also nodded in agreement. So he was aware of his wife's actions. Do you understand? A 35-year-old woman who can't even have kids is no longer needed. If you understand, then hurry up and leave. With a triumphant look, my mother-in-law pointed at me. After a moment of silence, I said, I see. I understand your views very clearly. I'll leave as you wish. I'll take all my belongings with me. Oh, please do. I doubt you have much to take with you anyway. Do you need help moving? My mother-in-law laughed and said, even though she didn't know anything. But I was the one who would have the last laugh. No, it's fine. Don't worry about me. Everything's already arranged. Huh? Since I wasn't crying or freaking out, my mother-in-law looked surprised. Besides, mother-in-law, I already know that you were helping Bob cheat on me. What? I smirked at my mother-in-law. What do you think I've been doing all day? If I just went to the city hall to get divorce papers, it wouldn't have taken this long. I spent all day arranging for a move and meeting with Melissa Smith. Oh my God. You met with Melissa? Bob asked me in a panic. So what? Did you think I would let you cheat behind my back and not say a word to the other woman? I made sure to note down her phone number when I checked your phone yesterday, I said calmly. Poor Melissa, though, she was really surprised when I called her and said, I'm Bob's wife. I'd like to meet with you. Apparently, you've been lying to her, saying that you're single. I told her the whole truth. Bob, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law were all shocked. They never would have thought I'd pull something like this off in just one day. Melissa found out that she was the other woman in your affair, and she was really upset. Of course, Mrs. Smith was furious too, at Bob and at you, mother-in-law. She was talking about suing you both for marriage fraud. I couldn't help but sympathize with her, so I promised I'd help as much as I could. What? Bob was visibly shaken. Of course, my mother-in-law was in the same state. Given the many ways in which Melissa deserves sympathy, I've decided not to claim any compensation from her. Instead, I'll increase the amount I claim from you, Bob, and you, mother-in-law, and father-in-law.
Compensation? Why the hell do we have to pay damages?
My father-in-law blurted out in panic.
It's one thing if it's just Bob, but we have nothing to do with this.
He seemed to have expected his son to pay some compensation for his affair, but they never dreamt that they themselves would pay. Are you going to take the best part without getting hurt? There's no such thing. Of course you do. The emotional distress caused by your harassment is more than enough reason, don't you think? As I said this with a smile, my father-in-law fell silent. And have you forgotten what I do for a living? I work at a law firm. Why don't I consult with my boss, the attorney, and see just how much we can squeeze out of you in compensation? I had already informed my attorney at the firm about the situation.
What?
Then the sound of a car pulling up in the driveway was heard. Oh, they're here.
Hey there, this is a moving service.
I headed to the door with a warm smile on my face. Thanks for having you come at late time. Sorry for the sudden request.
No problem. We had a spot open for the night shift.
It actually worked out for me as well. I managed to get some other things done, so please get started right away. Oh, and be careful. There are some fragile items. As I invited them in, several movers began to shuffle into the house and start gathering the belongings.
Wait! Hold on!
Following my instructions, they began to pack up my things with a swift and efficient rhythm. Not just my clothes, books, and computer, but even the appliances in the living room and kitchen.
Hey, you guys, don't take that. That's ours.
No. I brought everything here when we moved in. They're all mine. When Bob and I first moved here because of his job transfer, all the appliances in the in-laws' house were old ones that they'd been using for ages. I couldn't bear it and had our appliances shipped over from our previous apartment. Now it seemed that my mother-in-law had gotten used to the latest appliances and mistaken them for her own. A robotic vacuum and cordless cleaner. A high-end oven range capable of various cooking methods. An induction cooktop. A negative ion hairdryer and an espresso machine.
You're taking everything? You greedy woman!
Mother-in-law lunged at me, but Bob stopped her.
Mom, it can't be helped.
But it's all Jessica's. It seemed that Bob had accepted the situation. However, it seemed that my mother-in-law wasn't ready to give up just yet. Once you know the superiority of the latest appliances, you can't go back, right? If you're dissatisfied, why don't you buy new ones? Though, after paying the compensation, it seems unlikely that you'll have enough money to buy new high-end appliances. While this was going on, the movers were rapidly moving my stuff into their truck under my direction. They bowed to me and hopped into the truck. Okay, I'll be heading to the new address as well. Please make sure everything gets there. As I watched the moving truck drive off, I got into my car. Of course, this car is also mine. Where is that truck going? Bob asked. Huh? Of course, I'm taking it to my apartment. The one I lived in before you were transferred. My apartment. The apartment I bought when I was single was listed for sale with a realtor due to Bob's job transfer. However, because the asking price was too high, it never sold, and I still own it. The realtor suggested lowering the price several times, but I'm glad I didn't. I never imagined this would happen. As I fastened my seatbelt, I laughed softly. But maybe, just maybe, I predicted this would happen deep down. What? Bob made a face as if he didn't understand. Because I set a selling price higher than the market rate to make sure it wouldn't sell. This way, I could always move back to my apartment. Upon hearing my words, Bob seemed to crumble from the knees.
You, such a bitch!
Feeling sure of my victory and letting my guard down, I was suddenly shoved by my mother-in-law, who rushed at me yelling. As I groaned in pain, my mother-in-law attempted to throw a cutting board at me for a follow-up attack, but was suddenly tackled by a black object and fell down yelling, "Ah!" "Thank you, Blackie." Holding the black object, a stray cat named Blackie, I got in the moving truck and hurried to my new place to escape from my mother-in-law. I don't know why Blackie, the stray cat, was there at that moment, but I'm sure he came to help me because he has a strong sense of justice. I'll give him some catnip as a gift later. After that, Bob and I divorced. The law firm I work at filed a lawsuit for compensation against Bob and his parents. It's a real blessing that the young lawyers in training at the office accepted my case for almost no fee at all. Even though a young new lawyer is in charge, I feel secure because they have the support of a senior lawyer. As for the lawsuit against Melissa Smith, the senior lawyer himself took on the case, not the trainees. He said he will file both criminal and civil lawsuits because of the high degree involved. He said he's excited to file a criminal lawsuit, as it's been a long time since he's done so. Even if they sell their house and pay to Melissa Smith and to me, it probably won't be enough. Thinking about the life of extreme poverty and debt waiting for the three of them, I can't help but grin. I'm alone now, but compared to living with those in-laws and my disloyal husband, it's like heaven. For a while, I want to enjoy the easy single life with Blackie, who I inadvertently brought to my apartment.